The Nexari ship emerged from hyperspace like a jagged obsidian knife cutting through the velvet of space. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the bridge viewport of the UES horizon as the alien vessel positioned itself between her ship and the burning remains of New Haven Colony. The settlement's distress beacon still pulsed weakly among the debris, a final testament to the 3,000 lives lost in the attack. Multiple energy signatures detecting aboard the Nexari vessel, Lieutenant Park reported from his station, his voice steady despite the tension. They're charging weapons. Sarah's fingers tightened on the arms of her command chair. This wasn't her first encounter with the Nexari. No one in the United Earth Fleet could claim ignorance of the crystal-based species that had been systematically destroying human colonies for the past 8 months. But this was the first time she'd arrived soon enough to catch them in the act. "Open a channel," she ordered, ignoring the concerned glance from her XO. "All frequencies." The Nexari response came as a burst of crystalline harmonics that the ship's computer struggled to translate. When it finally did, the message was characteristically brief. "Leave or die." Sarah stood, her uniform crisp despite the 16-hour shift she'd pulled tracking the Nexari's path of destruction. "This is Commander Chen of the UES Horizon. We know you're responsible for attacks on 7 human colonies. We demand you cease hostilities and prepare for boarding. We can discuss terms." The Nexari ship fired, a lance of purple energy that the Horizon's shields barely deflected. The bridge crew braced as the ship shuddered. "Shields at 60%, Park called out. "They're preparing another volley." Sarah had expected this response, had counted on it. "Execute Protocol Sigma. All hands, battle stations." The Horizon's engines roared to life, pushing the ship into an aggressive attack pattern that brought them within close range of the Nexari vessel. It was a risky move. Conventional wisdom said to keep your distance from the crystalline alien's superior weapons. But Sarah had studied every encounter, every scrap of data, and she'd noticed something others had missed. The Nexari always kept their distance. "Ma'am," her science officer, Dr. Rivera, called out urgently. "I'm detecting unusual reactions in the Nexari hull structure. Their crystalline matrix is destabilizing." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "Magnify the view of their port side. There, see those fractures forming? That's why they've been hitting and running. That's why they never stay near our ships or colonies for long." The bridge crew watched in fascination as spiderweb cracks began spreading across the Nexari ship's surface. The alien vessel tried to retreat, but the Horizon matched their course, staying close. "Something about us affects them," Sarah continued. "Maybe it's our electromagnetic fields, maybe it's something about human biology itself, but prolonged exposure to our presence damages their crystalline structure. They're not attacking us because they hate us. They're attacking because they're afraid of us." The Nexari ship shuddered, pieces of its hull beginning to fragment and drift away. Their weapons powered down as they diverted energy to emergency systems. "They're hailing us," Park announced. This time, the crystalline harmonics carried a different message. "Please, distance, dying." Sarah felt the weight of command settle heavily on her shoulders. She had just discovered humanity's greatest defense against these attackers, and potentially their greatest weapon. The knowledge that human presence alone could destroy these beings would change everything about this conflict. "Pull back to minimum safe distance," she ordered finally, "but keep weapons locked. We need them alive to answer for what they've done." She paused, watching as the Nexari ship stabilized once they'd put more space between them. "And we need to understand exactly what we are to them." As the Horizon maintained its position, Sarah stared at the damaged alien vessel, knowing that this discovery would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. They had just learned they were more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. And that knowledge came with a terrible responsibility. "Send word to Fleet Command," she said quietly. Tell them we found the Nexari's weakness. And tell them we need to decide what kind of species we want to be. The kind that uses this knowledge for vengeance, or the kind that uses it to find a way forward." The message was sent, and Sarah Chen settled back into her command chair, knowing that the real battle, the one for humanity's soul, was just beginning. The stark white walls of the lunar scientific complex felt oppressive as Dr. Rivera studied the crystalline fragment under her microscope. 3 weeks had passed since the encounter with the Nexari vessel, and she hadn't left her lab for more than a few hours at a time. Commander Chen stood beside her, both women transfixed by the shifting patterns within the alien material. "It's beautiful," Sarah murmured, watching the play of light through the crystal's facets. "Hard to believe something so elegant could be responsible for so much destruction." "Beauty and danger often go hand in hand," Rivera replied, adjusting the microscope's settings. "But what we're seeing here is fascinating. The crystal isn't just their technology, it's them. The Nexari are a crystalline-based life form, and they're dying." Sarah's attention snapped to her science officer. "Dying. All of them." Rivera nodded, pulling up a holographic display of the crystal's molecular structure. "Their basic matrix is degrading. It's a fundamental flaw in their evolution, something that's been building for millennia. But our presence, something about human biology, accelerates the process exponentially. That's why they've been attacking our colonies." A new voice joined the conversation. Admiral Kenzo stepped into the lab, his weathered face grave. "They're not just acting out of fear or aggression. They're desperate." Sarah straightened, automatically moving to attention, but Kenzo waved her down. "At ease, Commander. What you discovered has changed everything. We've decoded more of their communications, analyzed attack patterns. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to harvest us." "Harvest?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Rivera's hands flew over her console, bringing up new data. "Of course, they're not taking prisoners because they're cruel. They're taking them because they need them. Human genetic material, properly processed, could theoretically stabilize their crystalline matrix. They're looking for a cure. At the cost of how many human lives?" Sarah demanded, thinking of the smoking ruins of New Haven Colony. "That's the question, isn't it?" Kenzo moved to the window, looking out at the Earth hanging in the black sky. "They're a dying species, using the only means they know to try to survive. And we're their inadvertent executioners, our mere presence toxic to them." "Sir," Sarah stepped forward, "what are our orders?" Kenzo turned back, his expression troubled. "That's why I'm here. The Security Council is divided. Some want to use this knowledge aggressively, push into Nexari space, force them to surrender or face extinction. Others advocate for finding a middle ground, a way to coexist." "Is coexistence even possible?" Rivera asked, gesturing to her data. "The degradation effect increases with proximity. Any attempt at peaceful contact could kill them." "We've received a transmission," Kenzo revealed. "The Nexari want to meet. They're sending their apex, their leader, to a neutral location. They're willing to risk death to talk." Sarah felt the weight of the moment. They must truly be desperate, or they have something else planned, Rivera warned. "This could be a trap." "Almost certainly both," Kenzo agreed. "Commander Chen, given your experience with them, I'm appointing you as our representative at these talks. Dr. Rivera, you'll accompany her. We need to understand if there's a scientific solution to this crisis." Sarah nodded, already thinking through the implications. "When do we leave?" "In 12 hours. The meeting point is an abandoned mining station in the Kuiper Belt, remote enough that if things go wrong, damage will be contained." Kenzo's expression softened slightly. "Sarah, Alina, what you discover there could determine the fate of 2 species. The Nexari are dying, yes, but they've shown they're willing to commit genocide to survive. We need to find another way, or we may have to make an impossible choice." As they prepared for the mission, Sarah found herself standing before the sample of Nexari crystal, watching it slowly deteriorate under human presence. It was strange to think that the key to peace, or to victory, might lie in understanding this beautiful, deadly substance. "We'll need containment suits," Rivera said, already packing equipment. Heavy shielding. Anything to minimize our biological impact. Will it be enough? Sarah asked. Rivera paused, looking up. To keep them alive long enough to talk. Maybe. To find a real solution. She shook her head. That depends on whether both sides want one badly enough to make sacrifices. As they left the lab, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading toward something bigger than a diplomatic meeting. This was a moment that would define humanity, not by their strength or their technology, but by their capacity for empathy in the face of an enemy that had shown them none. The abandoned mining station hung against the starfield like a rusted skeleton, its derelict form casting long shadows in the dim light of the distant sun. Inside the station's main chamber, Sarah Chen and Elena Rivera stood in their heavily shielded containment suits, watching as the Nexari ship docked with painful slowness. Life support readings are stable, Rivera murmured through their private comm channel. The shielding seems to be working. At least we won't kill them immediately. Sarah nodded, her attention fixed on the airlock as it cycled. The Nexari delegation emerged, 3 crystalline beings that seemed to flow rather than walk, their bodies refracting light in hypnotic patterns. The one in the lead was larger, its structure more complex, presumably the apex. "Welcome to neutral ground," Sarah said, her words being translated into crystalline harmonics. "We appreciate your willingness to meet." The apex's response came through their translators with an underlying tone of pain. "You do not understand what this costs us. Every moment in your presence brings agony, but extinction demands desperate measures. We know you're dying." Rivera stepped forward, her scientific curiosity evident even through the containment suit. "We've studied the degradation of your crystalline matrix, but harvesting humans isn't the answer. It is the only answer we have found." The apex's form shifted, displaying patterns that the translator interpreted as both grief and determination. 3 centuries ago, we discovered the flaw in our evolution. Our species is breaking down at the molecular level. Then we found your kind. So primitive, so fragile, yet possessing the key to our survival. At the cost of innocent lives, Sarah countered. There has to be another way. The apex's crystalline surface rippled. We have tried every other way. Millions of Nexari have already been lost. The harvesting of humans is regrettable. But faced with the extinction of our entire species, how could we choose differently? Rivera was already scanning with her equipment, data flowing across her HUD. The degradation rate. It's accelerating even through our shielding. We're killing them just by being here. Sarah felt the weight of the moment crushing down on her. Here they stood, 2 species, both fighting for survival. The Nexari weren't evil. They were desperate. But their desperation had led to the deaths of thousands of humans. "What if we could help you find another solution?" Sarah offered. "Our scientists, working with yours." "There is no time." The apex cut her off. "Even now, our children crystallize malformed, shattering before they can achieve consciousness. Your species represents hope. Painful, terrible hope, but hope nonetheless." "And if we refuse to be harvested?" Sarah asked quietly. "If we fight back?" The apex's response was simple. "Then we will take what we need by force, for as long as we can, until either our species survives or yours destroys us. There is no other choice." Rivera's voice came through their private channel. "Commander, their molecular structure. I'm seeing something we missed before. The degradation isn't just about presence. It's about compatibility. Their crystalline matrix is trying to adapt to our biology, but it can't handle the transformation." Sarah processed this information, watching the Nexari delegation struggle to maintain their cohesion even through the shielding. They were dying, yes, but they were also changing. Evolution forced by desperation. "You're not just dying," she said aloud. "You're evolving. But the process is killing you because you're fighting it." The apex's form shuddered. "Evolution that destroys is extinction by another name. We cannot survive the change, so we must find another way." even if that way condemns humanity. Yes, the word came with a finality that echoed through the chamber. We regret the necessity, but we will not apologize for trying to survive. Sarah looked at these beings, these living crystals willing to commit genocide to preserve their species, and felt the terrible weight of what might come next. They couldn't let the Nexeri continue harvesting humans. But could they live with being the instrument of an entire species' extinction? "We'll need time to consider your position," she said finally. "To consult with our leadership. Time is the one thing we do not have." The apex responded. "Make your choice, humans. Help us survive, or watch as we take what we need until either your weapons or your presence ends us." As the Nexeri delegation retreated, their forms already showing signs of stress fractures, Sarah turned to Rivera. "Tell me you found something in those scans. Something we can use." Rivera was still studying her data. "Maybe, but Sarah, any solution we find might still mean the end of the Nexeri as they currently exist. Sometimes survival means becoming something else entirely." Sarah watched the Nexeri ship detach from the station, carrying with it both a desperate species' last hope and humanity's greatest moral challenge. They had come seeking diplomacy and found only an impossible choice: become complicit in the harvesting of humans, or bear responsibility for the extinction of an entire species. The weight of that choice would haunt her all the way back to Earth. The war room deep within the Lunar Command Center buzzed with tense activity as holographic displays showed the advancing Nexeri fleet. 50 ships, each carrying thousands of crystalline beings, had entered the solar system. The largest invasion force humanity had ever faced. Commander Sarah Chen stood before the assembled military leadership, her dress uniform feeling too tight around her throat. "They're not here to negotiate anymore." The Apex made that clear in their final transmission. "They're here to harvest Earth itself." Admiral Kenzo nodded grimly. "Dr. Rivera, your findings." Elena Rivera stepped forward, her usual lab coat replaced by a military advisor's uniform. "The Nexeri are in the final stages of cellular breakdown. They're desperate, throwing everything they have at us, because they have nothing left to lose. But," she brought up a new hologram, showing the complex molecular structure of a Nexeri crystal, "we may have found something." The assembled leaders leaned forward as she continued. "Their evolution isn't failing, it's transforming. The presence of humans catalyzes a change in their crystalline structure. They've been fighting this change, trying to use human genetic material to maintain their current form. But if they embraced the transformation instead, they could survive." Sarah asked. "In a way, they wouldn't be the same species anymore. The crystal structure would become organic hybrid, more adaptable. But the transition would be," Rivera hesitated, "painful. Many wouldn't survive it." Admiral Kenzo's expression darkened. "And they've rejected this option. The Apex believes it would mean the death of their species' purity." Sarah answered. "They'd rather die as they are than become something new." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A holographic display updated, showing the Nexeri fleet's inexorable approach toward Earth. "We can't let them reach the planet." General Santos spoke up. 7 billion lives against their what? Million. The math is cruel but clear. Sarah stepped forward. "There might be another way. Dr. Rivera's research shows that a concentrated burst of human bioelectrical energy could force the evolutionary change. We could save them, even if they don't want to be saved. Or we could kill them all," Rivera added quietly. "The same burst could shatter their crystalline structure completely. It's the same principle. We'd just be pushing it past the breaking point instead of through the transformation." Admiral Kenzo studied the fleet movements. "How would we deliver such a burst?" "The lunar particle accelerator," Rivera explained, "modified to emit a specific frequency of bioelectrical energy. We'd only get one shot before they'd adapt, but it would reach their entire fleet. And we decide their fate with the flip of a switch," Sarah said. "Transform or destroy." The room erupted in debate. Some argued for simple destruction. The Nexeri had proven themselves unwilling to coexist. Others pushed for the transformation attempt, arguing that saving lives, even against their will, was better than extinction. Finally, Admiral Kenzo raised his hand for silence. Commander Chen, you've had the most direct contact with them. Dr. Rivera, you understand the science better than anyone. The decision is yours. Transform or destroy. Sarah felt the weight of billions of lives, human and Nexeri, pressing down on her. She remembered the Apex's words about survival at any cost, about choosing extinction over change. She looked at Rivera, who nodded slightly. We try to save them, Sarah said firmly. Even if they hate us for it, even if some don't survive, we have to try. The next hours were a blur of preparation. The particle accelerator was modified according to Rivera's specifications. The Earth's defense fleet moved into position, ready to engage if the plan failed. And Sarah found herself in the accelerator's control room, hand poised over the activation switch. Nexeri fleet is in optimum position, Rivera reported, her eyes on the readings. The transformation pulse is ready. Sarah, whatever happens, we tried. The Nexeri ships loomed larger on the display, their weapons charging. In a few minutes, they would be in range to begin their harvest of Earth. Sarah took a deep breath. Sometimes survival means becoming something else entirely. She quoted Rivera's words from weeks ago. Then she activated the pulse. The beam of concentrated bioelectrical energy lanced out from the lunar surface, catching the Nexeri fleet in its invisible web. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ships began to change. Crystalline structures flowed like liquid glass, reforming into new patterns. Some shattered, unable to handle the transformation. Others began to glow with an inner light as the hybrid transformation took hold. Through it all, Sarah watched, knowing she had just changed the course of two species forever. The question was, what would emerge from this crucible of forced evolution? The answer would come soon enough. 6 months after Operation Last Light, Sarah Chen stood in a specially designed chamber within the New Geneva Peace Complex, watching the transformed Nexeri representative approach. Where once there had been pure crystal, now there was something new. An iridescent being that seemed to flow between solid and liquid states, organic patterns swirling through crystalline matrices. Welcome to Earth, Sarah said softly. No containment suit was needed now. The hybrid Nexeri could withstand human presence. In fact, they seemed to draw strength from it. We did not want this change, the being who had once been the apex said, its voice a harmonious blend of crystalline tones and organic resonance. Yet here we are, made new by your intervention. Elena Rivera stood beside Sarah, her instruments recording every aspect of the transformed species. How many survived? 60% of our population, the former apex replied. The young adapted more easily than the old. Those who fought the change did not survive. We are no longer purely Nexeri, but neither are we extinct. We have become something else entirely. Sarah watched patterns of light shift through the being's semi-transparent form. Do you still hate us for forcing this upon you? Hate. The hybrid being seemed to consider this. We understand now what we could not before. Change is not death. It is evolution. Our fear of change nearly drove us to destroy your species. Your choice to save us rather than destroy us. It has given us much to contemplate. And the harvesting? Sarah asked. Do you still need human genetic material? No. The transformation you forced upon us has made us sustainable. We can evolve naturally now, adapt to new conditions. Some among us even believe we are stronger for the change. The being's form rippled with what might have been amusement, though few would admit this openly. Rivera's instruments beeped softly. The hybrid structure is completely stable, she reported. The evolutionary process has finished. Whatever they are now, it's permanent. The former apex turned its attention to the scientist. We have been studying the changes in ourselves. Perhaps Perhaps we could share this knowledge, work together to understand what we have become. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders, one she'd been carrying since she'd made the decision to transform rather than destroy. You're proposing cooperation, scientific exchange. We are proposing a beginning, the being replied. We are no longer what we were, but neither are we lesser for it. Your species forced us to evolve when we would have chosen extinction. It was not a gentle act, but perhaps it was a necessary one. Sarah thought of all the lives lost on both sides, of colonies reduced to ash and Nexeri, who had shattered rather than change. Was it worth the cost? The hybrid being's form shifted, creating patterns that seemed almost contemplative. Ask us in 1,000 years, when both our species see what we might become together. For now, we know only that we live, we change, and we learn. As they began discussing the terms of scientific cooperation, Sarah found herself studying the being before her, neither purely Nexeri, nor anything else known to human science. They had set out to prevent the extinction of a species and had instead catalyzed the birth of a new one. It wasn't a clean victory, or even really a victory at all. It was simply survival, with all its messy complications and uncomfortable truths. In the end, they had saved the Nexari by destroying what they were and forcing them to become something new. The price of survival had been transformation, willing or not. As Sarah watched humans and hybrid Nexari beginning to work together, she wondered what transformations awaited humanity in return. The universe, she was learning, rarely offered simple solutions. Sometimes, the only choices were between different kinds of change, different forms of evolution. The trick was finding the wisdom to choose well, and the courage to live with the consequences. As the hybrid being moved away to speak with other scientists, Sarah turned to Rivera. Did we do the right thing? Rivera watched the swirling patterns of light that now characterize the transformed species. We did the human thing. We saw a problem, and we fixed it, whether they wanted us to or not. For better or worse, that's who we are. Sarah nodded, thinking of all the changes still to come. Then I guess we better make sure we're ready for whatever the universe throws at us next. Together, Rivera added, gesturing to where humans and hybrid Nexeri were already deep in scientific discussion. Together, Sarah agreed, watching the future unfold before her eyes. The Nexeri had sought to prevent their extinction and found transformation instead. Humanity had sought to defend itself and found the power to reshape entire species. Both had been changed by the encounter, and neither would ever be quite the same. Perhaps that, Sarah reflected, was the greatest lesson of all. Survival wasn't about remaining unchanged in an evolving universe. It was about having the courage to become what you needed to be, even if that meant becoming something entirely new. The transformed Nexari were proof of that. And humanity, standing at the dawn of a new era of interstellar relations, would soon learn its own lessons about evolution and change. The story of two species was ending. The story of what they would become together was just beginning.